There's a belt inside your Ford's engine, not on the front behind a plastic cover where a belt has lived since belts were invented. Inside, running in the oil with the oil pump hanging off it. That's the 1-litre EcoBoost, and it's in more British driveways than any other small petrol engine of the last 15 years. Fiesta, Focus, EcoSport, C-Max, Puma. And here's what that belt does as it ages. The rubber softens in hot oil and starts shedding, not in one piece, in particles. Those particles go round with the oil until they reach the pickup strainer in the sump, which is a fine mesh, and they sit on it. The mesh blocks a bit at a time. Oil pressure drops. The bearings start running on a film of oil that isn't thick enough to keep metal off metal. And then it's not a belt job anymore. It's an engine. A specialist will do that belt for £800 to £1,100. A main dealer will want £1,500 to £2,000. And a replacement engine is several times either number. So here's the one thing to hold on to for the whole video, because it decides everything else. A bill you were always going to get isn't a repair, it's an instalment. Now let's knock this title down before we go a step further, because you'd be right to be suspicious of it. Cheaper to repair than a Ford is a big claim, and it isn't true across the board. Ford parts are among the cheapest in Britain. Every garage in the country knows these cars inside out. Half the trade learned on them. 2 of the 5 brands on this list will hand you a bigger bill than a Ford when something goes bang, and one of them isn't close. And nobody here is telling you Ford is finished. The Puma is still the best-selling car in Britain and has been for years. When one warranty firm looked at 20 popular SUVs, the Puma came second on claim rate, behind a RAV4 and ahead of a lot of posher badges. That's a real result, and it deserves saying out loud. What we're measuring is narrower than the title, and it's the bit nobody puts on the windscreen. How often you're stood at a service desk, what it costs when you're there. And the third one, which is the one this whole video turns on, whether the bill was designed in before you ever saw the car. Stay with me, because number 1 isn't a joke and it isn't a downgrade. It's the brand that walked into the exact space Ford spent 50 years owning the moment Ford walked out of it. I'm Terry Halloran, and this is British Vehicles. No manufacturer pays us a penny. No press cars, and we don't sell cars. Everything here comes from published data, and we'll tell you which is which. Do me a favour before we start. Hit subscribe. It's free and it costs you nothing, and this is the sort of thing that stops a mate signing for something daft on a Saturday morning. Right, where this comes from, because there's a mountain of American content about Ford, and almost none of it applies here. Over here, the numbers that matter are the what car, reliability survey, the Honest John Satisfaction Index, warranty-wise, the recall and MOT records the DVSA publishes, and warranty claims data from Warranty Solutions Group. That last one's the interesting one, because it doesn't ask anybody how they feel about their car. It counts claims made and claims paid. Real faults, real bills, real money. There's more than one cut of that data, and we'll say which every time. A 22-brand study built on more than 10,000 claims in the year to June 2025. A later one across 35 manufacturers, and a separate one covering 20 popular SUVs, which is where the Puma's number comes from. And here's something we haven't got, said plainly. That 22 brand table doesn't publish a claim rate for Ford, so we're not going to invent one or imply one. Where we put a number against a number, it'll be the same study both sides. Where we haven't got the number, we'll talk about the engineering instead, because the engineering is documented and it's the part that decides your bill. 2 more. There's no UK figure for how many of any model are sat unsold on a forecourt. Nobody publishes that here, whatever you've been told. And this is brand level data, so there's absolutely a good Ford and a bad Toyota. Judge the engine and the history in front of you, not the badge. Number 5. Kia. Kia goes first because Kia is doing now what Ford did for 50 years. Sensible family cars at money normal people can find from a dealer that's actually near you. In the first half of 2026, Kia was the second best-selling brand in Britain. Ford was number 1 back in 2014, and by a couple of years ago it had slipped to 5th. Now the honest bit straight away, because Kia isn't here for being spotless. In that 22 brand study, Kia's claim rate was 13.74%, with an average bill of $571. That's mid-table. There are brands further down this countdown twice as good on both halves. If you came expecting Kia to be bulletproof, it isn't. What Kia did do is refuse to fit the thing that went wrong at Ford. And that thing is the dry dual-clutch gearbox. Here's the mechanism, because once you understand it, you'll never need anyone's opinion again. Ford's PowerShift, the DPS6, went into Fiestas and Focuses from about 2011 to 2016. It drives like an automatic, but underneath it's 2 clutches and 2 gear shafts, and those clutches are dry. No oil bath. The heat has to go into the air. Now think what a car does in traffic. Crawling at 5, 10, 15 miles an hour, that clutch is grabbing and slipping and grabbing again hundreds of times in one journey. Heat builds with nowhere to dump it, the friction material glazes, and the grip goes uneven. That's the shudder. Owners describe it as driving over rumble strips pulling away, then a delay selecting drive, then the control module throwing faults because it's managing clutches that no longer behave predictably. Most of the Kia range runs a proper torque converter automatic instead, or a plain manual. A torque converter is also allowed to slip. The difference is that it slips through fluid, and the fluid carries the heat away and gets cooled. It was designed to slip. The other one was designed not to, and then asked to, every single day, in every British town centre. Second honest bit, and it matters. Kia do fit a dual clutch in some models, so check which gearbox is in the actual car in front of you, not what the brochure says about the range. And there was a run of Kia and Hyundai petrol engines with genuine problems the group got hammered for. From that period, you want paperwork showing the work was done. No paperwork, walk away. The paperwork is the other half of it. 7 years or 100,000 miles as standard, and it transfers, so a 4-year-old one hands the next owner 3 years of cover. Ford gives you 3 years or 60,000 miles, then it's over. On tax, a Picanto or a Ceed is nowhere near the 40 grand list price that triggers the extra charge. A Sorento or an EV9 sails past it. We'll come back to that number because it catches more cars than people realise. Verdict on Kia. You're not buying a cheaper repair, you're buying a gearbox that wasn't on a countdown and 7 years of somebody else paying. A bill you were always going to get is an instalment. Kia removed one from the plan. Number 4. Suzuki. Half of you have just pulled a face. Nobody's ever sat in a pub telling their mates about their Vitara. Here's why it's here. In the newest cut of that warranty data, covering 29 manufacturers, Suzuki came out top of the entire British market with a claim rate of 6.29%. In the wider 35 brand study, the average Suzuki bill came in at $447 against an all-brand average of $621, and the mechanism is the most boring thing in this video, which is exactly why it works. When the emissions rules tightened, every maker in Europe had the same problem. Get the official fuel figure down without making the car slower. Ford shrank the engine, bolted a turbo on it, then hunted every gram of friction and deleted it, which is where a belt running in oil came from. Wet belts aren't stupid. A belt in oil is quieter than a chain, and it drags less, and less drag means a better number on the test. It was an answer to a rule, not an accident. Suzuki's answer to the same rule was to take the weight out instead. A Swift's around a ton. And weight is the thing that everything else on a car is sized around. Less weight through the springs and bushes. Smaller brakes doing less work, so the pads and discs last. Less mass to get moving, so less strain through the clutch and the gearbox. Modest engines that aren't being asked for much. And, on a lot of them, a chain on the front of the engine where you can get to it. Nothing in there is waiting for you. That's the whole argument. The cover backs it up, and it's better than most people know. 3 years or 60,000 miles to start, same as Ford. But every service at a Suzuki dealer puts another 12 months on, renewing up to 10 years or 100,000 miles. It applies backwards to older cars, and if you've been away from the network for years, you can rejoin. Now the honest bit, and it's a real one. The current Swift scored 3 stars at Euro NCAP in 2024, 67% for adult occupant protection, 65% for child. The Jimny got 3 stars back in 2018. If you're carrying grandchildren about, that's a proper consideration, and no warranty on earth fixes it. Read the report and decide for yourself. Second honest bit, aimed at Ford owners specifically. Ford's network is everywhere. Suzuki's isn't. If your nearest Suzuki dealer is 40 minutes away, that 10-year warranty is worth less than it looks on paper because it only renews there. On tax, nothing Suzuki sells gets near the 40 grand line, so you're on the standard rate, and that's the end of it. Verdict. It's not a better car than a Focus, and I'm not going to insult you by saying it is. It's a car with less on it, which means less of it is on the instalment plan. Quick favour before the top 3. If this is any use to you, give the like button a tap. Takes a second, costs you nothing, and it shoves this in front of somebody who's about to sign for the wrong motor this weekend. Cheers. Number 3. Mazda. This one's for the person who bought the Ford because they like driving it, because that person exists in enormous numbers and nobody talks to them. Numbers first, and the honest bit is the number. In that 22 brand study, Mazda's claim rate was 10.40%, with an average bill of 629s. That's barely under the 22 brand average of 651, and it's well above what a Ford part typically costs you, because Ford parts are made in millions and Mazda's aren't. So when a Mazda does let go, expect it to sting more than the Ford would have. That's the trade, said plainly. What you're buying instead is how often it happens, and the reason is that Mazda refused to do what everybody else did. Here's the mechanism. While the rest of the industry shrank engines and turbocharged them, Mazda kept a big chunk of the petrol range naturally aspirated. Bigger capacity, no turbo, timing chain, on the front of the engine, in the dry. Take the turbo first. A turbo spins in exhaust gas at speeds you can't picture, fed by a thin pipe of oil, at temperatures that cook that oil every time you switch off hot. It's a wear item pretending not to be one. No turbo means that 4-figure bill doesn't exist on the car. Not unlikely. Absent. Then the belt. The reason a wet belt is a different animal from a normal cam bolt isn't just that it's a belt. It's where the debris goes. A dry belt on the front of an engine lives behind a cover, and when it gets old on its own, outside the engine, and you can look at it. When a belt runs in the oil, everything it sheds goes into the oil, and the oil goes everywhere. That's the difference between a part wearing out and a part poisoning the thing it's fitted to. Mazda's chain is at the front, behind a cover, driven off the crank, and a garage can reach it with the engine still in the car. Symptom to listen for on any Ford with that belt, and this is worth writing down. A rattle or a slapping noise from the front of the engine in the first couple of seconds of a cold start. A whine. An oil light that flickers rather than stays on. Black tar on the underside of the oil filler cap. Any of those. and you get it looked at that week, not that year. Mazda's cover has moved too, and quietly. Anything registered from September 2025 comes with 6 years and 100,000 miles as standard, as long as you keep to the service schedule. Not 3. 6. Now the honest bit on Mazda, and it's a big one. Stay well away from the 2.2 diesel unless you do proper miles. Here's why, and it applies to any modern diesel. To burn the soot out of the filter, the engine squirts extra fuel in late in the cycle to get the exhaust hot enough. On short runs that burn never finishes, the unburnt fuel washes past the piston rings into the sump. Your oil level climbs above the max mark instead of dropping, and the oil thins out. You'll smell diesel on the dipstick and hear a tapping from the top end. Independent Mazda specialists see it constantly, and they change the oil at half the book interval to stay ahead of it. If you do 3 miles to the shops and 3 back, no diesel on this list suits you, and I'd rather say that now than sell you a countdown. Watch the older ones too, roughly 2010 to 2012, for rust round the rear arches and underneath. Mazda had a reputation for it then and sorted it, but a car from that era wants somebody with a torch under it before you shake hands. On tax, most of the range sits under the 40 grand line. A loaded CX-60 or CX-80 clears it, so check the list price it had when new. Verdict: buy the naturally aspirated petrol. Same job as Ford's engine, same road, same weather. No installment attached to it. Number 2, Toyota. Toyota topped that 22 brand study outright, a claim rate of 7.02% and an average bill of 479.58, which is both halves of the sum won at once. In the newest cut it came second at 7.09%. And here's the honest bit up front, because it's the one that makes the rest of this worth listening to. When that firm looked at 20 popular SUVs, the RAV4 came top on claim rate at 9.68%, but its average bill was $825.28. The Ford Puma came second at 10.48%, with an average bill of $807. Read that again. On that study, the Puma broke barely more often than the most reliable used SUV in Britain, and when it did, it cost slightly less. If your Ford is a Puma, a lot of this video isn't about you, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise to make a tidier story. What Toyota has that Ford hasn't is the thing under the floor, and this is the mechanism nobody ever explains properly. The Toyota hybrid gearbox isn't a gearbox. There's no torque converter, no clutch pack, no dual clutch, no belt, and no bands. It's a planetary gear set with the petrol engine connected to one part of it and 2 electric motors connected to the others, and the ratio is managed electrically by varying how hard those motors are working against each other. Nothing slips. Because nothing slips, there are no friction surfaces to wear out. That's the entire trick, and it's why the minicab trade runs them to 200,000 miles on the original unit. There's more. The petrol engine runs on the Atkinson cycle at low load and shuts down completely in traffic, so it does fewer hard hours than one that idles all day at a set of lights. And the brakes last for years, because the motor does most of the slowing before the pads touch the discs. Every one of those is a bill that never arrives. Compare that with what the small turbo strategy asked of a Fiesta. A tiny engine working hard, a turbo cooking its own oil feed, and a wear part living in the sump. Ford weren't careless. They answered a rule about carbon dioxide with the cheapest engineering that met it. Toyota answered the same rule by spending the money on hybrids 20 years earlier and spreading it across the range. 2 answers, 2 very different bills at year 8. The cover is the other half. 3 years or 60,000 miles to start, then every qualifying service at a Toyota dealer adds another 12 months, up to 10 years or 100,000 miles. And this is the part almost nobody knows. It applies to used cars, including ones that were serviced somewhere else entirely. You can buy a 6-year-old Toyota with a patchy history put it through a Toyota dealer for a service, and come out with 12 months of manufacturer cover on a car that age. The honest bit. Toyotas are dull, and the hybrid drones when you boot it, because the revs go up and sit there while the speed catches up. Some people can't live with that noise, and it's a taste thing, not a fault. The interiors are plain next to what Ford was doing in a Focus ST line, and nobody's pretending different. And the 10-year cover only stays alive if you keep going back to a Toyota dealer, which is a warranty and a leash. On tax, a Yaris or a Corolla is nowhere near the threshold. A Land Cruiser or a loaded RAV4 clears 40 grand without trying. Verdict. Toyota built a transmission with nothing inside it that wears, then kept selling it for 25 years. Nothing in there is booked in to fail. That's the rule. Hardest version, right? Before number 1. If you've stuck with me this far, do me a favor and subscribe, because number 1 is the one nobody sees coming, and it's the one that says the most about what's actually happened to Ford. Number 1. Dacia. Half of you have just pulled a face again, and harder this time. Stay with it. For 50 years, Ford's job in this country was one thing: the affordable car that a normal family could run. Escort, Fiesta, Focus, Mondeo, not a lifestyle. Transport at a price from a dealer down the road. Ford has now stopped doing that job. The last Mondeo was built in April 2022. The S-Max and Galaxy went in 2023. The Fiesta, still the best-selling car this country has ever had, ended in July 2023. And the last Focus came off the line at Saint-Louis on the 14th of November 2025, after 27 years. No direct replacement for any of them. Ford's own chief executive said the company was getting out of the boring car business. Somebody had to do that job, because the demand never went anywhere. The Sandero has now been Europe's best-selling car outright, 2 years running, and it's been the best-selling car to private buyers in Europe since 2017. That is Ford's old job, being done by somebody else, in front of us. Now the data, and it's better than the badge suggests. In the newest cut of that claim study, Dacia came in at 9.49%, in the top handful of the whole British market. In the SUV study, the Duster was named among the strong performers alongside the RAV4 and the Puma. The mechanism is that Dacia is deliberately, unapologetically behind the times. The hardware is proven Renault kit that's been round the block for a decade, shared across an enormous number of cars. And that does 2 things for you. Parts are cheap and everywhere, for the same reason Ford parts are, and there's less fitted that can fail. Fewer modules, fewer screens, fewer sensors quietly waiting to cost you 4 figures the month after the cover stops. And on the timing question, which is what this whole video has been about, the TCE petrols run a chain. Honest John has confirmed it for the 1.0 TCEA in this generation of Sandero, and the trade will tell you the same about the 0.9 before it. Not a belt, and certainly not a belt in the oil. The older 1.2 and the 1.5 diesel run a conventional dry belt on the front, where you can inspect it and replace it on a schedule like a grown-up. Now the honest bits, and there are several, and the first one is serious. Euro NCAP. The Sandero scored 2 stars in 2021. The Jogger scored 1 star in 2022. The Duster managed 3. And you need the detail, not the headline, because the detail changes what you do with it. The Sandero scored 4 stars for adult occupant protection and 4 for child. What dragged it to 2 overall was safety assist, because Dacia chose not to fit the camera-based systems that stop the car hitting a pedestrian or a cyclist. Dacia have said openly they won't chase stars for kit their customers don't want to pay for. That's their call, and it's an honest one, but it's your family. Read the actual report for the exact model and year before you sign anything. Second, the warranty is the weakest on this list. 3 years or 60,000 miles, and then servicing at a Dacia dealer keeps it going only to 7 years or 75,000 miles. You can buy an extension to 6 years and 100,000. Next to Kia's 7 and Toyota's 10, that's thin. Third, they're basic, and the driving position doesn't suit everybody. The seat wants to meet you at hip height, so you neither climb up nor drop down into it. That's personal. It varies with hips and knees and backs, and no reviewer can tell you the answer. Go and sit in one properly before you commit to anything. Fourth, and it's a mechanical one. Owners of the older 0.9 TCE do report chain rattle at higher mileages. A chain isn't magic. What a chain gives you is a part that lives in clean oil and warns you before it goes, instead of a part that quietly fills your sump with debris. Verdict. The most reliable thing about a Dacia is how little of it there is. Old, dull, chain-driven, shared with millions of other cars, and not one installment built into the engine. That's the rule, hardest version, from the badge nobody brags about. A bill you were always going to get isn't a repair. It's an installment. And I'll say this next bit carefully, because I'm not telling you there's a scheme. It's quieter and simpler than any conspiracy. When that wet belt first went into service, the guidance treated it as something you'd essentially never have to touch. Over the years, as failures mounted, that guidance came down. Independent specialists who do these every week now say, inspect at around 8 years or 80,000 miles and change the belt, the tensioner, the oil pump, and the pickup as a set at around 10 years or 100,000, because doing them together means you only pay the labour once. Nobody hid that. But think who had a reason to tell you. Not the salesman who's paid on the deal in front of him. Not the service book, because a wear part with no interval printed against it simply doesn't appear on one. Not the general garage down the road, because plenty won't touch the job. It needs specialist tools and exact timing procedures, and there's no money in explaining work you're going to send elsewhere. Nobody had to lie. There was just no profit anywhere in the chain in mentioning it, so the knowledge grew over, like a footpath nobody walks. And the people who get caught out by this aren't daft, and they aren't careless. They bought the most popular car in the country, serviced it where they were told, and were never handed the one line that mattered. That's not a customer failure. That's a bill that was designed in and then never disclosed. Quick run back. 5. Kia. Mid-table on claims and no cheaper per repair, but a proper torque converter instead of a dry dual clutch, and 7 transferable years of somebody else paying. 4. Suzuki. Lowest claim rate in the country on the latest data, an average bill around £200 under the all-brand average, and €3 NCAP stars you have to weigh yourself. 3. Mazda. A bigger bill when it comes, but no turbo to fail, and a chain in the dry at the front, plus 6 years of warranty are standard now. 2. Toyota. Best on both halves of the sum, a transmission with nothing inside it that slips, and 10 years of cover you can reactivate on a used car, and 1. Dacia. The brand that took the job Ford put down. Old proven hardware, chains in the petrols, a claim rate in the top handful of the market, and a Euro NCAP report you need to read properly before you buy. Here's what I actually want you to take away, and it's bigger than these 5 brands. 2 questions are worth asking about any car, and neither is on the windscreen. How often does it break? And when it breaks, was that bill designed in, or was it bad luck? Wear items are fine, everything wears. What you don't want is a wear item sat somewhere that turns its own wear into engine damage, with no interval printed anywhere. And now the bit almost nobody puts in these videos, and it quietly changes the answer. Tax. For 2026 to 2027, the standard rate is $200 a year from the car's second year. But if the list price when it was new was over $40,000, you pay another $440 a year on top for years 2 to 6. That's $640 a year and $2,200 over the 5. It's based on the published list price including factory-fitted options, not what anybody actually paid after a discount, and it follows the car rather than the buyer. So it's your bill on a used one, even though you never saw that list price. Think about which cars that catches. A loaded Cougar, an Explorer, a double cab Ranger with a few boxes ticked, a Sorento, a Land Cruiser, a big RAV4, and which it doesn't, a Puma, a Fiesta, a Swift, a Yaris, a Sandero, a Mazda 3. Same road, same year, thousands apart before anybody's fixed anything. For electric cars, that threshold went up to $50,000 from April 2026, so check which side yours sits on. Look up the exact registration on the gov.uk checker before you fall in love with it. It's free and it takes a minute. Same with emission zones. Never take a seller's word that a car is ULEZ or LEZ compliant. Put the registration into the Transport for London checker or your own council's and read the answer yourself. Getting that wrong is £12.50 a day, and 2 things that cost nothing on whatever you already drive. 1. Next cold morning, drop the window and start it and listen to the first 2 seconds. Not the 10th, the first 2. A rattle or a slap that clears as the oil pressure comes up is a belt, a chain, a tensioner, or a guide telling you it's tired. Most people hear that for months and decide it's just what the car does. 2. Engine cold, take the oil filler cap off and look at the underside in daylight. You want clean oil, black tar, gritty sludge, or anything like coffee with too much milk in it, and you get that car looked at properly. On a wet belt engine, that grit is the belt telling you where it's going, so tell me in the comments. What have you got? How many miles is it on? And what's the biggest bill you've had in the last 2 years? And the bit I actually want to know, was that bill a part that wore out, or a part that took something else with it? If you've got an EcoBoost that's had the belt done, say what it cost and who did it, because there are people watching who need that number. And if you've run a Fiesta to 150,000 miles without a murmur, say that too, because that's data as well. If we've got something wrong, tell us straight. We'd rather be put right. There's a card up on screen now with another one of these. Have a look, it's worth your time. Buy with your head, not the badge. This video is based on publicly available recall notices, MOT test data, safety ratings, reliability surveys, and independent review evidence current at time of publication. Individual vehicle outcomes vary. Some models may have had subsequent updates, recalls, or improvements. Always obtain current information and independent advice before making any purchase decision.